When I touched my son's chest and realized he was struggling to breathe, I felt a dark force sweep through the house, as if something were pulling him away from me, and the healer's name rose in my mind before I even understood what was happening. The cold floor beneath my knees felt distant as I tried to steady Noah in my arms. His body was far too light, far too still, as if life were slipping through my fingers. Not even the silence of dawn helped. It was a strange silence, one that pressed against the ears as if every sound of the night were waiting for something to happen. All I could think was that something was far too wrong to be just illness, something no doctor had been able to explain. I called his name again, feeling my own voice tremble, and Noah opened his eyes just enough to look at me as if he were trying to return from some faraway place. He murmured something I couldn't understand, but the way his hand searched for mine filled me with a desperation I never thought I'd feel. My chest burned with the sense that I was losing time, that an answer was close, yet still out of reach. When I realized his breathing was failing in uneven intervals, the world shrank around me and my body reacted before my mind did. I thought of her. The woman everyone avoided, the only one who seemed to see what others pretended did not exist. The healer. And in that instant I understood that if I didn't go to her, Noah might not see the sunrise.
He rarely spoke about what happened in 2005, as if that year had remained locked in some dark corner of his memory that only spirituality could reach. Sometimes, when the vibration of the night changed and the wind blew from the Warren Mountains, Elias felt the weight of that ancient silence again. It was as if the forest itself breathed with him, reminding him that nothing had truly ended. The emotional story that was about to return seemed to have a life of its own, as if it had patiently waited for this moment. In the days leading up to it all, Elias carried an exhaustion that didn't come only from long hours in the carpentry shop. It was a deeper ache, something that crossed through his energy and turned every step into a reminder of the choices he had made. Noah, at 12 years old, already noticed what his father tried to hide. The boy had a strange sensitivity for his age, something that blended wisdom and fragility. Elias couldn't understand how someone so young could see so much, but he avoided thinking deeply about it. At that time, Warren seemed even smaller than it truly was. Old houses lined up along narrow roads, a constant smell of damp wood, and the sense that everyone watched everything with excessive caution. There was something in the community that mixed superstition and respect, especially when the subject involved the healer who lived at the edge of the forest. Without realizing it, Elias began remembering small signs, shadows passing by the window, whispers that might have been only wind, but that quietly shifted his vibration. He didn't speak about the healer in that early phase, but her presence hovered like a distant echo, almost inevitable. Elias clearly remembered the day he heard two women saying Maeve Callahan had been seen lighting candles before sunrise, a gesture that brought unease to the community. Not that anyone dared confront her, since everyone knew her wisdom went far beyond the ordinary. Elias didn't want to believe she had any connection to what was about to happen, but something inside him already knew. And there were the dreams as well. Not his, but Noah's, who began waking up saying he had seen a woman in the distance, wrapped in a faint light, murmuring something he couldn't understand. The boy spoke calmly, as if it were normal, saying only that she looked sad. Elias tried to ignore it, but each account touched something deep within him, stirring an old, almost ancestral energy. At that time, he still couldn't imagine that these visions were the first warning, a whisper of what was to come. When Elias closed his eyes at night, he felt something slowly approaching, brushing the edges of his consciousness. It wasn't exactly fear, but a subtle pressure reminding him that the emotional story of that year was still alive inside him. Spirituality had always been distant for Elias, yet now it seemed to seep through invisible cracks. Every shift in the vibration of Warren's air left him unsettled, as if the energy around him were trying to say something he couldn't decipher. Noah's health worsened without warning. It began with unexplained fatigue, fevers that rose and fell, a strange shine in his eyes that kept Elias on alert. The doctors at the small clinic tried to justify everything with terms that convinced no one, and with each appointment Elias felt the weight of an undefined guilt. Noah, even weak, kept that unusual serenity that always unsettled his father. Sometimes the boy murmured that, "This isn't the end," as if he understood more about his own energy than any adult around him. No one in Warren dared speak openly about Maeve Callahan, but everyone knew she watched from afar, walking through the forest with slow, steady steps. People whispered that the healer could sense when something serious approached, though no one admitted believing it. Elias tried to push away every thought involving her name, yet he couldn't ignore the fact that ever since Noah fell ill, he had begun noticing small signs, like birds perched on the roof at dawn and the wind shifting directions for no reason. One afternoon, while Elias helped Noah lie down, he heard a sound like branches snapping just outside the window, even though there were no trees there. He froze. Noah opened his eyes slowly, drew in a deep breath and whispered that he felt someone watching. The words cut through Elias like a blade. That wasn't something a sick child should say, but ignoring it became impossible. The vibration of the room felt different, as if the air had gained an invisible weight. And that same night, Elias had the first clear sense that the healer already knew everything. It wasn't a vision nor a dream, but a silent presence settling inside the house as the moon climbed. A shiver ran down his spine, as if someone whispered his name against his ear. For an instant, he thought he saw a figure crossing the hallway, but when he blinked, nothing was there. Still, something inside him affirmed with certainty that Maeve Callahan was drawing near. In the days that followed, the energy of the house seemed to shift subtly, as if something walked through the corners at night and watched each of Noah's breaths. Elias tried to keep the routine, but spirituality began infiltrating every detail of the day, even the simplest sounds. The wood creaked as though answering his thoughts, the lights flickered without cause, and the sensation of being watched never left his shoulders. He tried to rationalize it, but what he felt came from a place deeper than logic could reach. Noah's fever spiked unpredictably, sending tremors through his frail body that Elias couldn't control. Worry blended with desperation, and guilt tightened in him as if something were slipping through his fingers. At times, Noah seemed to wake in a different vibration, looking at his father with an ancient wisdom that didn't belong to a 12-year-old. "She will come," he murmured once, his voice as faint as the thin line of light entering through the window. Elias stepped back when he heard that sentence, feeling his chest collapse inward. He knew exactly who Noah meant, though he had never spoken her name aloud. The community preferred silence when the subject was Maeve Callahan. Some said she spoke with ancient spirits. Others swore they had seen her converse with the forest as if it were an old friend. Regardless of belief, the truth was that her name carried a weight no one dared challenge. Elias felt that the thread of their emotional story was tightening. That night, as he tried to rest, Elias heard soft footsteps in the yard. Not an animal, the rhythm was human, slow and deliberate, like someone who knew each leaf on the path. He rose quickly, heart racing, and looked out the window, but found only mist moving in an oddly intentional way. The wind fell silent, as if waiting. Elias held his breath, for a different vibration touched his skin, almost like a silent warning that none of it was coincidence. For the first time, Elias accepted that a greater force was shaping the events, something ancient, inevitable, and far beyond his understanding. His body trembled when he realized that this was only the beginning, that what came after would be even deeper. Noah slept, breathing irregularly, and Elias stayed by his side, attuned to each shift in the air. A thought crossed his mind uninvited, whispering like a voice not his own, "I need her help." The next day, Elias stepped onto the porch hoping for fresh air, but found the mist clinging to the trees as if the world were suspended. The energy there had always been quiet, yet now something unsettling stirred in it, brushing his skin like a warning. He looked toward the forest where Maeve lived and felt a strange pull, almost spiritual, as if guided by a wisdom he didn't recognize. It was the first time he admitted feeling it so clearly. As he watched the horizon, he noticed faint marks in the soil, as if someone had walked through during the night. The steps were long, careful, and unlike anything he had seen before. A chill ran down his spine as he remembered the sound from the night before. The vibration around him felt different, as if every detail of nature carried a hidden meaning. Elias sensed he could no longer ignore the signs, for something ancient was moving into his emotional story. Inside the house, Noah drifted between moments of clarity and periods of deep confusion. In one of those quiet hours, he lifted his eyes and looked at his father with a calm that didn't match his fragile health. "She's waiting for you to understand," he whispered, then closed his eyes again. Elias stood frozen, trying to process the words. He wanted to ask more, but a quiet fear tightened his throat. It felt as though Noah was connected to something Elias himself could not comprehend. As the afternoon went on, despite his exhaustion, Elias began tidying the house as if expecting a visitor. He didn't know why he was doing it, only that he was following an impulse that seemed to come from someplace deeper. He put his tools away, opened the windows and lit a candle, something he would never normally do. The flame wavered strangely, leaning toward the forest, and Elias felt his heart clench. It was as if the spirituality of the place were responding to his movements. When night fell, the silence grew so thick it seemed to have shape. Elias sat beside Noah's bed, watching the boy's fragile breathing. His fear, once scattered, now took on a weight he could barely bear. The vibration of the room pulsed in a subtle yet constant rhythm. He rubbed his face, trying to stay calm, but through the window he saw a faint silver glimmer between the trees. He didn't know if it was real, but in that moment he was certain Maeve's presence was no longer just a possibility. Elias tried to deny what he had seen, but his body reacted before his mind could. The air grew dense and every sound in the house seemed to pull back, as if waiting for something. Noah murmured incoherent words, trapped between dream and fever, and Elias felt an urge to protect him without knowing from what. The spirituality of the room grew slowly but steadily, like a tide rising with no intention of stopping. He took a deep breath, trying to stay sane as his inner vibration wavered. Hour after hour, the night advanced, bringing with it a silence that didn't belong to the natural world. The house seemed to observe Elias as much as he observed Noah. Restless, he placed a hand against the wall and felt a faint warmth, as if something pulsed behind the wood. It was impossible to explain, but that touch awakened an old memory, a sense he had felt once in childhood. Their emotional story seemed to intertwine with something much larger. Noah woke abruptly, his eyes wide and fixed on a point in the ceiling. Elias called him, but the boy didn't answer. His lips moved in a near whisper, repeating a phrase Elias couldn't make out. He moved closer and heard only fragments, as if Noah were speaking to someone who wasn't there. When Elias touched his shoulder, the boy finally looked at him and said in a voice almost too soft to hear, "She doesn't want you to be afraid." The words cut through Elias like ice. From that moment, Elias realized he was being prepared for something. He didn't know by whom or why, but there was an invisible intent shaping every detail, every sensation, every shift in the air. Noah's health seemed to float between extreme fragility and brief flashes of clarity, as if his energy responded to an external force. Elias began to feel a deep guilt for not seeking help sooner, and that guilt turned into fear, but also into a strange determination. Just before dawn, a soft sound echoed outside, something like a staff tapping against the ground. Elias wasn't sure if it was real, but his heart recognized its meaning before his mind did. He walked toward the door with hesitant steps, every muscle trembling. When he turned the knob, he saw only thick mist covering the yard, but a faint trail of crushed herbs marked the ground. In that moment, he understood. Maeve had been there. Elias stood in the doorway for several seconds, trying to decide whether what he saw was exhaustion or a clear sign that the healer had indeed approached. The vibration of the air brushed his skin as if it carried intention, and for a moment he felt watched. The trail of herbs looked far too fresh to be coincidence. He closed the door slowly, his heart pounding in a rhythm that didn't match the quiet house behind him. When he returned to the room, he found Noah sleeping deeply, his face illuminated by a soft light coming through the window. It wasn't the moon, nor any reflection from outside. It was something different, a glow that seemed to breathe, to pulse, as if it carried a presence. Elias approached cautiously, and the energy around Noah grew warmer, almost comforting. Even without understanding it, he sensed that whatever it was did not threaten, only announced that greater forces were moving around them. With the sunrise, Warren regained its usual calm, but nothing felt normal to Elias. He walked into the kitchen and smelled faint burnt herbs, something impossible, since no stove was on and no candle had been lit. He ran his hand over the counter and found small dark particles, like crushed leaves. The memory of Maeve passed through his mind with force. He wondered whether it was a sign from her, some sort of spiritual intervention the healer used to prepare the space before showing herself. Later, as he watched Noah try to eat, Elias noticed the boy seemed more alert than in previous days, still weak, yet with a different clarity, as if connected to something Elias couldn't reach. Noah looked at his father and whispered, "She is near. You feel it." A cold shiver moved through Elias's stomach. That wasn't something a sick child would say. It was the certainty of someone who sensed forces beyond explanation. Spirituality seeped through every word of that moment. When afternoon arrived, the weather shifted abruptly. Heavy clouds swallowed the sky and a strange wind swept through Warren, lifting leaves as though obeying a silent command. Something stirred inside Elias, a blend of fear and anticipation. The emotional story he was trying to avoid was unfolding before his eyes. He realized all of it was a summons, a preparation for the inevitable meeting with the healer. And for the first time, he didn't try to run. When Elias stepped outside to inspect the yard, he noticed the branches seemed to bow slightly toward the forest, as if following a force blowing from within it. The vibration of the environment was charged, almost electric, and the spirituality that had once been only a whisper had become a constant presence. Fear touched him, but so did an odd sense of being guided, as if ancient wisdom called his name. It left him uneasy, yet unable to turn away. Upon returning inside, he found Noah sitting up in bed, his eyes fixed on the doorway as if expecting someone to enter. The boy's breathing was slow but steady, and a strange serenity spread across his pale face. Elias approached him cautiously and asked if he was all right. Noah simply replied in a low voice, "She knows you are ready." The words struck him with force. Ready for what? Elias tried to press further, but the boy closed his eyes, slipping out of the conversation as if he had already said everything he needed to. The feeling of being watched grew stronger as daylight began to fade. Elias walked through the house with careful steps, alert to every shift in the air. In every corner, it felt as though someone had just passed through, leaving behind a faint change in energy. The lights flickered intermittently, creating shadows that moved slowly along the walls. A tightness grew in Elias's chest as he realized this was the transition, the moment when the unseen began touching the physical world more clearly. Just before turning on the lamps, he found a small bundle of herbs tied with cotton string left on the porch. There was no way anyone could have placed it there without him noticing, yet the object rested as though it belonged to the house. Elias picked it up and felt a gentle heat spread through his fingers. The scent was strong, unlike any common herb. Maeve's wisdom was inscribed in it, silent and deliberate. There was no denying it was a direct summons. When he held the bundle, a brief vision flickered before him. The forest shrouded in mist, the silhouette of a woman walking between the trees and a pale light guiding her steps. He blinked, and the vision vanished, leaving only the speeding of his breath. The emotional story he had tried to avoid now pressed against his reality with growing intensity. Her presence, once distant, now touched him clearly. Elias knew he could no longer escape the healer, not after feeling her energy so vividly. Elias walked back into Noah's room with the bundle still in his hands, trying to understand the meaning of the fleeting vision that had left him breathless. The boy slept deeply, but his body looked more at ease than in previous nights, as if some protective energy surrounded him. Elias felt his heart ease for a moment, though the uneasiness clung to him. He knew the bundle wasn't just a gift. It was a warning that the healer was about to act. When he placed the bundle on the table beside the bed, he noticed the candle flame tilt toward it, as if responding to the presence of the herbs. The vibration of the house shifted once again, creating a silence so deep it seemed to swallow the ordinary sounds of the night. Elias didn't know if he was ready to face what was unfolding, but the need to save Noah pushed him forward. It felt as though the spirituality of the space were conspiring for him to accept the inevitable. As the night advanced, Elias tried to rest in the armchair beside the bed, but his body refused to settle. Every time he closed his eyes, fragmented images appeared, always the same feminine figure walking through the mist. In one of them, he heard a short, firm phrase, almost like a command. "Listen to what you cannot see." He opened his eyes in alarm, looking around as if expecting someone to be there. No one was, but the room's energy throbbed with renewed strength. Noah awoke moments later, breathing with effort, and Elias rushed to hold him. The boy opened his eyes just long enough to look at him. "She will come when the night ends," he murmured, his voice barely a thread. Elias felt his stomach drop. His hands trembled, but he tried to reassure the boy. Noah rested his head on his father's chest, seeking comfort, and Elias realized how fragile his son truly was. The thought hit him with painful clarity. There was no more time to hesitate. When the last hours of the night began to fade, Elias heard the distant sound of the staff again, but this time something was different. The sound wasn't approaching, it was calling, as though someone were marking a path only he could hear. A shiver climbed his spine as he realized it wasn't the healer coming toward him, it was he who needed to go to her. It felt as if the house itself held its breath when that truth struck him, silent and undeniable, awakening a determination he didn't know he possessed. Elias stood for several minutes at the center of the room, trying to absorb the sensation that had taken hold of him. It felt as if the house pressed at his back, urging him forward. He looked at Noah asleep and felt a pain so deep it nearly made him falter. But something ancient, quiet, and impossible to ignore told him the boy's healing depended on this journey. He drew a slow breath, letting the spirituality of the moment guide his energy toward the path he feared to take. Before leaving, Elias took the bundle of herbs the healer had left and tucked it into his pocket, feeling the faint warmth pulse through the fabric. The object seemed alive, carrying a part of Maeve's intention, a reminder that she knew exactly what was happening. He walked to the door, hesitant but resolute. Outside, the mist wrapped around him like a cold veil, and the vibration of the air shifted instantly, as if acknowledging that he had chosen the correct path. The streets of Warren lay silent, as though the small town slept deeply or chose not to interfere with what was about to unfold. Elias followed the road leading to the forest, feeling the damp earth beneath his feet and hearing sounds he had never noticed so clearly. The wind seemed to murmur ancient words full of wisdom. He didn't understand them, but he knew the emotional story guiding him was moving toward a decisive moment. With each step, his fear mingled with an unexpected courage. When he reached the forest's edge, a mild shock tingled up his arm as though an unseen force recognized him. The vegetation felt different, denser, more alive, as if observing his arrival. He moved carefully, guided by the distant rhythm of the staff striking the earth. There was something hypnotic in that cadence, something that spoke directly to his inner vibration. For the first time, Elias admitted that spirituality might be trying to save him, not frighten him. The deeper he walked along the trail, the clearer the sensation became that Maeve was waiting. There were no physical signs of her presence, yet a dense, unmistakable energy guided his steps like an invisible thread. The forest seemed to make space for him, as if respecting his late decision. His heartbeat quickened when he saw a dim light far ahead, a soft golden glow that could only come from the healer's home. The moment he had dreaded was finally before him. The faint light pulsing between the trees seemed to breathe with the forest itself. Elias felt his knees weaken at the distant sight of Maeve's house. Hidden partly by mist, the structure emanated an energy difficult to describe, a blend of calm and unease. He took slow steps, noticing how each movement stirred his inner vibration more intensely. It was impossible to deny that approaching that threshold touched the deepest parts of his emotional story. When he drew closer, he noticed the door stood slightly open, as if someone had stepped out only moments earlier. The old wood seemed to absorb the light of the lantern inside, casting slow-moving shadows across the walls. Elias hesitated on the threshold, a cold shiver moving down his spine. He didn't know how he would be received, nor whether Maeve accepted visitors, but Noah's failing health erased any remaining doubt. With his heart racing, he pushed the door and stepped inside, guided by the need to save his son. The interior of the house was unlike anything he had ever seen. Shelves filled with jars, herbs hanging from the ceiling, symbols carved into the wood, and a dense perfume of ancient incense filled the air. Spirituality felt alive there, touching every object with purpose. Elias sensed the energy vibrate around him, as though the house itself recognized his presence. He took a few steps and murmured a hesitant call, but his voice came out too soft, swallowed by the deep silence ruling the place. As he moved toward the center of the room, he heard a faint sound from the back, something like fabric sliding slowly across the floor. Elias held his breath, his heart pounding. The shadows shifted, and a silhouette emerged gradually, walking with the calm of someone in no rush. Maeve Callahan did not seem surprised to see him. Her eyes, deep as ancient wells, passed through him with silent recognition. She tilted her head slightly, sensing every fragment of energy he carried. Maeve raised her hand, asking for silence without needing words. Every gesture was slow, steady, marked by a wisdom that felt older than the walls around them. Elias felt his entire body react, as if everything inside him suddenly aligned. The healer approached with light steps, and her presence filled the room like a quiet tide. When she finally stopped before him, she spoke just one sentence, layered with spiritual weight he could not ignore. "You took longer than you should have." Her words struck Elias with painful precision, as though she saw not only his guilt, but everything he had hidden from himself over the years. He tried to respond, but no sound came. The healer simply watched him, her eyes reflecting a mix of sorrow and ancient understanding. The energy in the room thickened, becoming more aware, more present. Elias felt the vibration in his chest, reminding him that there were no masks here, only the truth he had avoided for too long. Maeve walked around him in silence, her steps barely touching the floor. Each movement seemed to awaken something in the air, as though the space responded to her presence. Elias realized the silence wasn't empty, but full of intention and expectation. Without looking at him, the healer murmured, "Your son called for me before you did." The sentence hit him like a blow. His legs weakened and he steadied himself against a nearby table, fighting for breath beneath guilt and disbelief. The healer then stopped before a set of bottles arranged on an old wooden cabinet, choosing some with the ease of someone who conversed with the herbs themselves. Elias watched, noticing how each gesture had purpose, how every touch stirred subtle spiritual currents around her. The house breathed with her. For a moment, Elias felt he was witnessing something not meant for ordinary eyes, something ancestral. Yet it was his only chance to bring Noah back to life and strength. Without turning, Maeve asked in a low voice, "Do you know why you took so long to come here?" Elias tried to answer, but the truth was he didn't know. Or maybe he did, and refused to admit it. He muttered something about fear, about not wanting to believe in the supernatural. Maeve turned slowly, her eyes holding a wisdom that felt centuries old. "Fear drives away prosperity and life," she said, touching a bottle with her fingertips. "But love brought you here." The sentence opened something inside Elias, as if an invisible door cracked wide. A sudden warmth spread through his chest, tangled with anguish and gratitude. It was true. He had come for Noah. Only for him. Maeve approached again, holding a small glass container wrapped in red thread. The energy radiating from it was intense. She placed it in Elias's hand and said with calm certainty, "Now, you must gather the courage to hear what you are not yet prepared to know." Elias held the small bottle carefully, as though afraid it might break at his touch. The energy pulsing inside felt almost alive, as if it recognized him. Maeve remained silent, studying the way he reacted. The house, once just a shelter, now felt like a witness listening to every breath. Elias realized he wasn't only asking for help. He was crossing an invisible boundary, stepping into a realm where spirituality shaped every detail with ancestral precision. The healer then walked to an old chest and lifted its creaking lid, revealing dark cloths, dried herbs, and objects Elias couldn't identify. Each item seemed heavy with history, saturated with deep vibration. Maeve took out a small circular amulet and handed it to him. "This will hold the path back," she said softly. Elias didn't understand, but he felt the symbolic weight of the object. Something inside him began to align, as if his energy were responding to the touch of those ancient pieces. Maeve stepped back and finally faced him fully. Her eyes, as deep as the forest itself, examined not just his face, but every emotional fragment he carried. "Your fear opened the wrong doors," she said calmly. "And now, you must close them before something greater awakens." Elias felt his heart pound faster. He didn't know what doors she meant, but the truth echoed inside him with painful accuracy. His guilt, denial, and resistance, all of it gathered around that single sentence. The healer asked him to step toward the central table, where a circle marked with herbs and charcoal symbols lay drawn. Elias hesitated, but his need to save Noah pushed him into that space, heavy with meaning. As he entered the circle, the air compressed around him, as though the house recognized his energy and made room for it. Maeve lifted her hands and touched the air above the circle, and the vibration of the place shifted abruptly, awakening something that moved beyond human understanding. In the silence that followed, Maeve tilted her head slightly, as if listening to voices from a world no one else could hear. Elias watched every gesture, not daring to interrupt. The healer murmured words he couldn't decipher, yet they stirred subtle waves through the room, as though currents of energy drifted in the air. She then looked back at him and said, "None of this began now." The sentence fell over Elias like a shadowed revelation. Before he could ask its meaning, she added, "You were warned." A cold shiver climbed Elias's spine at those words. The idea that he had been warned unsettled him deeply, because he couldn't remember anything that fit such a claim. Maeve sensed his confusion and moved closer, resting one hand lightly on the circle of herbs. "The signs were in your home long before Noah's fever," she said gently. Elias tried to deny it, but flashes of memories surfaced, small night noises, shadows slipping away too quickly, dreams he forgot upon waking. The healer walked slowly around the table, her movements so silent they seemed woven into the air itself. "You ignored everything because you feared believing it," she continued. Elias lowered his gaze, guilt rising like a tide inside his chest. Noah's condition was now a living reflection of his denial. The spirituality he had avoided all his life surrounded him with unavoidable force. He realized their emotional story had not begun with the boy's illness, but long before it, perhaps within his own lineage. Maeve touched the amulet in Elias's hand, and a warm ripple traveled up his arm. The sensation made him shiver, as if an old memory tried to climb back into consciousness. He opened his mouth to ask what it meant, but before he could form the question, the healer whispered, "Do not fear what comes from within." Elias blinked, confused. The phrase sounded like a warning, but also an invitation to face something internal, something he had avoided exploring. The room's vibration responded to her touch, emphasizing the weight of the message. The healer walked to a shelf and picked up a worn notebook covered in symbols Elias didn't recognize. She opened to a page marked by dried herbs and showed it to him. There were drawings representing cycles, energy waves, and spiritual figures intertwined. "He is trapped between two paths," she explained. Elias felt the world tilt for a second. His mind searched for logic and found none. What remained was the crushing certainty that Noah faced something beyond the physical world. Maeve closed the notebook gently and met his gaze with firmness. "You must choose whether to face the truth or keep wasting time." The words cut sharply. Elias felt the weight of that choice settle on his shoulders, as though the boy's fate rested entirely on his courage. Deep down, he knew he had made his decision the moment he left his house that night. He stepped closer to the healer and drew a deep breath. "What do I do now?" he asked, his voice filled with desperation and hope. Maeve watched him for a long moment, as though evaluating not the question, but his inner readiness to receive the answer. The lantern behind her flickered, casting shadows that moved to the rhythm of their breaths. At last, she replied, "First, you must accept that you are not here by accident." The sentence pierced something deep within Elias. It was as if the healer were unearthing a truth he didn't know he carried, an ancient vibration dormant inside his own story. She walked to a clay bowl and began mixing herbs with slow, deliberate gestures, each movement filled with intention. The aroma spread through the room, filling it with an energy both intense and strangely comforting. Elias watched in silence, trying to understand what was happening. Maeve then said, "Your son did not fall into this illness on his own. Something called him, something that has circulated in your family for generations." Elias's heart sped up. He didn't know what that meant, but he felt the gravity of it. Maeve placed the mixture before him, letting the scent rise toward his skin. "Breathe," she instructed. Elias hesitated, but obeyed. As soon as he inhaled, a strange sensation filled his chest. It was warm but didn't burn, heavy but didn't suffocate. It felt as though the energy were traveling through every one of his memories, searching for something. His vision darkened for a moment, and disjointed images emerged. His childhood home, a narrow hallway, a shadow he didn't remember ever seeing. He opened his eyes suddenly, breath shallow, shaken. Maeve steadied his energy with a hand on his shoulder. "You are not seeing everything yet," she said firmly. "Truth only reveals itself when the soul stops resisting." A tremor moved through Elias's body. What he had mistaken for fear began to show itself as something else entirely. A block he had carried for years, maybe even before Noah was born. It felt as if the healer were dismantling his defenses one by one, exposing pieces of himself he had never dared to face. She sat down again, her voice calm but unwavering. "To save your son," she said slowly, "you must understand what you tried to forget." Elias swallowed hard. The sentence echoed inside him like both a warning and a sentence. He realized that none of this was only about Noah. It was about him too, about old choices, ignored signs, and the invisible thread connecting their lives to that moment. And for the first time, he felt fear not of the supernatural, but of himself. Elias remained silent, searching for what exactly he had tried to forget. His mind chased answers and found only blurred fragments that dissolved before taking shape. Maeve, sensing his turmoil, said softly, "Memories do not disappear, they only sleep when we are not ready." The phrase struck him hard. It felt as though something pushed his awareness inward, forcing the past to rise slowly, like a dark wave nearing the surface. She lit a second candle, thinner and darker. As soon as the flame rose, the room seemed to shrink around them. The air grew heavy but not oppressive. It felt like the spirituality of the place was preparing itself for something important. Elias watched her every movement, unable to look away. Maeve said, "Your son is between two worlds because someone opened a gap." It wasn't him. Elias felt his stomach drop. The idea that he might be responsible began forming sharp, painful edges. Maeve moved the candle to the center of the circle drawn on the floor. The flame swayed unnaturally, bending toward Elias as if recognizing something hidden within him. "The vibration of your fear fed this gap," she continued, "even without intention." Shame spread through his chest like fire. He didn't want to believe it, yet part of him did. It was as though an old truth were finally finding space to surface. The healer extended her hand, urging him to step deeper into the circle. When Elias took the first step, a soft crack echoed through the room like wood adjusting. The energy changed, growing steadier, denser, as if something acknowledged him. Maeve took his hand with unexpected strength. "Do you feel this?" she asked. Elias nodded, unable to speak. The sensation reached far inside him, touching emotional layers he had never explored. Maeve spoke with a severity that sliced through the silence. "What is draining your son's life came from you, but it was not born in you." Elias felt the ground tilt. The sentence was both a wound and a strange relief, as though she were saying he carried responsibility, but not full blame. Spirituality wrapped the moment, awakening emotions he barely recognized. He understood now that he was only at the beginning of something far larger than he had imagined. Elias felt the impact reverberate inside him like a silent thunder. He didn't know how something could come from him without originating in him, but the statement carried an emotional truth he couldn't deny. Maeve walked slowly, as if aligning her thoughts. "Certain marks pass through generations," she explained. "You inherited something you never knew how to name, and now it reveals itself in your son." The room's vibration pulsed lightly, affirming the depth of her words. He tried to argue, but the words dissolved before reaching his lips. His mind searched for rational explanations, But what he felt went far beyond logic. It was impossible to ignore that Noah's health had worsened in the same rhythm that his own fears had intensified. It was a connection Elias had never considered. Maeve's wisdom was sharp, direct, as though she could see into worlds he had never imagined. The spirituality surrounding that moment revealed more than he could bear. The healer stood before him again, holding the amulet firmly. "What brought you here was not your son's illness, but the awakening of the truth you avoided." Elias felt the sentence move through him like a hot current. Their emotional story was no longer just a fight for Noah's life, but a confrontation with something that had followed him for years, silent and persistent. He understood then that he wasn't there only to save his son, but to face what had shaped their fate long before. Maeve lifted the amulet between them, and the candlelight reflected in a golden, restless shimmer. "From here on," she said, "every step you take affects his path. You must be strong enough to carry what was left behind." Elias drew a deep breath, feeling the weight of a destiny he barely understood. But within that weight was a glimmer of hope. If the energy had come through him, perhaps he could redirect it. Perhaps there was still a way to restore Noah to life and strength. The healer stepped back and finished with a voice that held both warning and promise. "What happens now will decide who Noah becomes at dawn." Elias felt the gravity of her words wrap around him completely. It was the omen of something vast, profound, and dangerous. The room flickered with growing intensity, as if the spiritual world were preparing for something greater. Elias knew at that moment he stood at the threshold of a rite that would change everything, and there was no return. The room fell silent after Maeve's final sentence, as though the air awaited Elias's decision to keep existing. The flame bent sharply, casting a shadow across the amulet in his hand. A weight swelled in his chest, not fear, but responsibility finally gaining shape. He sensed something moving just beyond ordinary sight, a subtle shift in the room's vibration, as if ancient forces were gathering to witness what would unfold. Maeve circled the ritual space with slow, deliberate steps, tracing gestures in the air that seemed to awaken the walls. The energy thickened, conscious and alert, breathing with them. Elias steadied himself, gripping the amulet. The healer murmured, "What is tied to you will reveal itself, but only what is necessary." His heartbeat quickened. Nothing about this felt exaggerated or theatrical. It was real, deep, a living spirituality unfolding in layers he had never imagined confronting. A sudden draft swept through the room even though the windows were closed, extinguishing one of the candles. Darkness expanded in a single corner, forming a shape that made Elias step back. Maeve lifted her hand, firm, as if commanding the unseen to be still. Her eyes reflected the movement of the shadows, but she showed no fear, only recognition. "Do not look outward," she said calmly. "Look inward." Elias tried, but something in that darkness called to him, something that seemed to know him from before he existed. The healer stepped into the center of the circle and began chanting in a low, resonant tone. The sound echoed as though multiplied by ancient voices hidden in the walls. Elias felt his skin prickle, his vision blur, and thoughts that weren't his own rise like fragments of forgotten dreams. He saw Noah laughing in the yard, then frail in his bed. He saw himself as a sick child, feverish in a narrow room. A shadow stood by the bed, familiar in a way he wished it weren't. Something was repeating. The floor vibrated faintly when Maeve stopped chanting. She opened her eyes and fixed them on Elias with piercing clarity. "He is not only sick," she said. "He is trapped between what you inherited and what you tried to forget." The sentence struck him with brutal truth. His lineage, silent wounds, secrets no one spoke of, all rose before him. Guilt cut through him, but so did a fierce determination. He understood now that this emotional story was far from over, and that Noah's life depended on him completely. A strange warmth rose along the arm holding the amulet, as if the energy inside it were reacting to everything Maeve had awakened. Spirituality filled the room, taking form in the stillness. Elias breathed deeply, trying to organize his thoughts, but the more he tried, the clearer it became that this moment could not fit into any rational frame. It felt as though his story and Noah's had been woven long before that night, waiting in silence for the exact moment to reveal themselves. And now they had. Maeve brought one hand close to Elias's chest without touching him, as if reading the vibration that moved inside him. Her eyes narrowed, not in judgment, but in recognition. "There is more fear in you than you admit," she said calmly, "and more love than you believe you have." Her words cut and soothed at the same time, awakening memories of nights when he held Noah in his arms, silently begging for the boy's life and strength, even when he claimed not to believe in anything. Now standing before the healer, he felt those silent prayers had been heard in ways he never understood. No true plea ever disappears. It only waits for the right moment to return. And that moment had arrived for both of them. Maeve then stood behind him and asked him to close his eyes. Her voice came firm, wrapped in ancient wisdom. "You will see only what you need," she warned. Elias obeyed, feeling a faint numbness crawl up his neck. First came darkness, dense, quiet. Then tiny sparks of light emerged like memories forcing their way back. He saw Noah as a small child, running through the yard, laughing. And in the distance he sensed a presence he could not name, a still energy watching them. The scene shifted like a page turning on its own. He saw himself as a child, feverish, lying in a narrow room. No faces, only a dark outline near the bed. The same sensation surrounding Noah now seemed born from that moment. He opened his eyes abruptly, as though pulled out of an ancient well. His body trembled, cold sweat gathering at the back of his neck. Maeve watched him in silence, never rushed, allowing the moment to unfold. "Now you understand why I said it didn't begin with him?" she asked. Elias couldn't answer. He felt his past braided with Noah's, both touched by the same invisible thread that crossed time, fear, and blood. The revelation struck him with a force no doctor could ever explain. They spoke of symptoms, but none touched the repeating echo now staring him in the face. Elias realized that refusing this truth meant risking Noah's life, and he couldn't bear that. Maeve sensed the crack opening inside him and returned to the circle. "There is still time," she said, though her tone carried more warning than reassurance. She sprinkled another handful of herbs around the candle, which flared with sudden brightness. Spirituality responded instantly to her gestures. Elias felt certain that this was no longer preparation. This was the moment the ritual began to touch Noah's fate directly, shaping his energy and the fragile line between life and loss. A low sound drifted from outside, like a distant chant, blending wind and leaves. Maeve closed her eyes, listening to something he could not hear. "He is not alone," she murmured. "And neither are you." Something steadied inside him. The candle then bent sharply, as if an invisible current swept through the room's center. Elias stepped back, feeling the temperature change around him. Something approached, not in form, but in presence. Maeve lifted her arm, firm, and the space responded with absolute silence. "Now," she said, "pay attention." The floor vibrated subtly, and Elias sensed Noah's energy, distant, fragile, but alive. It felt like the boy was calling to him across a place that wasn't physical. Spirituality became a single pulse through the room. Elias understood. This was the moment everything would hinge upon. Maeve began a low chant, nearly voiceless, repeating words he couldn't decipher. The herbs around them glowed faintly, releasing a sweet, dense fragrance that seemed to pass through skin and into the soul. Guided by the vibration of the chant, Elias closed his eyes and saw Noah lying there, breathing weakly yet bathed in a faint light that looked as though it awaited something. The amulet warmed in his hand, as if awakening. A force rose inside him, made of love, fear, and a courage he had never known. That force began to move. When he opened his eyes, Maeve was staring at him with unwavering intensity. "Call for him," she said. Elias hesitated, but the urgency in her gaze left no room for retreat. He gripped the amulet and called his son's name, first softly, then louder, until his voice sounded as if it had been torn from the deepest part of him. The candle's flames surged violently, lighting the entire room. Maeve guided the energy with deliberate motions. A piercing ache cracked Elias's chest, as though something ancient were being torn free inside him. Then the light expanded for a heartbeat, filling everything, and Elias felt Noah respond. Not with words or vision, but with a warm impulse that struck through his chest like a wave. He fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the intensity of the connection. Maeve stepped closer and touched his shoulder. "He has returned to the right path," she said gravely, "but he will still need you when morning comes." Elias swallowed hard, shaken by relief and the exhausting weight of the ritual. Something inside him shattered and reformed at once. He knew then, Noah would live. Maeve held the amulet between both hands and lifted it toward the candle until a golden glow spread across the circle. "It belongs to your son now," she said with steady calm. "When you return home, place this on Noah's chest. He must feel this energy near him, always close, always protecting." Elias accepted the amulet the way someone holds hope itself, warmth pulsing beneath his fingers. The healer stepped back, as if handing him more than an object, handing him a responsibility that would outlive that night. When Elias returned home, still shaken by everything he had witnessed, he found Noah sleeping deeply, his breathing steady. Strong in a way it hadn't been for days, a peace filled his chest. He touched the boy's face and realized the fever was gone. Tears fell freely. He didn't understand everything that had happened. Perhaps he never would. But he knew Maeve had given Noah another chance. And more than that, she had returned to Elias something he thought he had lost forever: the ability to believe in life, in energy, and in the wisdom hidden in the shadows of the world. And now, awakened by everything he lived, Elias looks at you, the one listening to this story. If it touched your soul, if it brought reflection or hope, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Your presence helps keep these stories alive, filled with emotion, spirituality, and mystery. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about courage and love. And when you finish, choose another story on the final screen. There is much more waiting for you. All you need is to take the next step. And if you made it this far, I want to sincerely thank you. Stories like this only come to life when someone chooses to listen, to feel, and to reflect on the spirituality that moves through generations. Every minute you stayed here is also an act of respect for the roots that still pulse silently in the world. Healers have always walked among us, women who use the strength of spirit, the vibration of the earth, and the wisdom of the ancients to protect lives when no one else knew how. Many were silenced, called witches, hunted for believing in what medicine of the time could not understand. Even so, they continued helping, even under the shadow of fear. When we tell stories like this, we are not only creating emotion, we are recovering the memory of women who walked alone through forests, who listened to others' pain before their own, who remained firm despite carrying invisible scars. Honoring these stories is remembering that the spiritual prosperity we seek today exists only because someone before us lit the first flame. Perhaps that is why these narratives strike so deeply. They speak of courage, of faith, of people who found strength where the world saw only weakness. And as we recall the path of these women, we also rediscover parts of ourselves that were asleep. Their wisdom didn't die. It lives in every gesture that heals, every intuition that protects, every vibration that guides our steps. So if this story meant something to you, remember this: every time a healer is remembered, an old wound closes. Every time her name is spoken without fear, a fragment of past injustice dissolves. And every time someone chooses to listen, their energy remains alive, guiding, teaching, and reminding us that, in the end, spirituality always finds a way to endure.